Hello there, I'm Meredith Blackwell, and I'm here as part of the oral history project for Mycology that we've been doing for about 3 years now. And we're on the University of Florida campus, well, at the edge at the Hilton Hotel on the campus. And it's the 11th of July 2022. And we're here as part, well, we're here because the Mycological Society of America is having their annual meeting. And I'm really lucky today to be able to talk to Jerry Benning, or Gerald Benning. And he is someone who was here on a postdoc when I was on a postdoc at the University of Florida, probably 50 years ago.
Well, not quite that long, but 1973, whatever that is.
That's right, because that was the year I graduated, but I was here the year before.
74, maybe.
Yeah. So anyway, so we've known each other a long time, although I haven't seen Jerry in a number of years. But he's spent much of his life working on zygomate seeds, what we used to call zygomate seeds. And so I want to talk to him about that. But I also want to talk to him about his major professor, who was a remarkable person named Richard Benjamin. And so we'll talk about those two topics. So, Jerry, why don't you give me a little idea about where you were born? And
I was born in California, Southern California, grew up in Long Beach, California. Okay. And I went to Cal State Long Beach. I think that's a university now. And they had a microbiology department, and as one of the classes, we took medical mycology. That's how I got started. And I really got interested in zygomycetes when I saw Dr. Benjamin's presidential address. Is that 66? Something like that in Mycology. And so I corresponded with him, went up, got cultures, and did a master's degree on the histochemistry of Dimargotales and Kixolales, and then I went and worked with him for a PhD.
And I should point out, for people that think fungi are not very pretty, if you take the time to look at these fungi that Jerry looked at, you'll find that they're absolutely gorgeous. They have spirals, they have all sorts of really fancy appendages and spores that are really unusual. Yes. I think they're the most beautiful of all the fungi.
You think so? Well, that's good. And so he gave me one of, guess basically 3 projects. He had several collections there that were in culture. He didn't have the facilities to lyophilize. He had a Dimargotaceae collection, and he had a Semansian and Kixolales collection, and he had Piptocephalus. And he said, well, you know, you could do any of those, but people think that you've already, you know, you're working on with me or something. And so I took the Thamnidiaceae, what was then Thamnidiaceae, they're all broken up now. And so did a lot of culturing, collecting. It was all dung stuff mainly in those days.
And it was sort of unusual animals, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, we just collected whatever was around, little rats and mice, and you know, if they were,
insects and lizards, or
no, not too much. Sometimes he would get stuff and isolate things. I've seen him, you know, because I've got all of these cards and stuff here, all the zygos, some of the herbarium material, the Piptocephalus, the described things are at the Farlow. And then I have a bunch of things that haven't been described, and they're here. So I've got that collection. I've got Semansia to work on, and I have all those herbarium specimens. So we'll just probably distribute those as we get time.
Okay, now Piptocephalus is a mycoparasite of other zygomycetes mostly.
Right.
But what about the ones you worked on, the
No, they're all saprophytes.
Okay. So you picked one of the easier ones, I guess.
Yeah, I thought at the time it would be easy. It'd been easier for me to work on that later, because those all those things Benjamin had worked up, and because the Piptocephalus drawings had already been a lot of them inked, and I have those here, and that has to be monographed. Tom Graffinen, do you know him? He did a master's degree on Piptocephalus. He worked at CBS a lot with GAMS. And so when he passed away in 2002, then I was able to pick up all the zygomycete specimens at the Rancho Santa Botanic Garden. It's now the California Botanic Garden in Claremont, California.
And that's where you got your PhD.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, actually from Claremont Graduate University, but I did all the work up in at the Rancho.
And it's part of the Claremont group.
Yes, yeah. They felt sorry for us because we were up there and the whole bunch was down in the city, you know. We were out in the sticks, kind of. So when I worked on things, as I look back on it, it'd been good to publish the Piptocephalus monograph, get that finished up, because I've still got that stuff. That definitely needs to be done. And
so how many species about?
You know, Nicole Reynolds did a phylogenetic analysis, and I don't remember how many species there. Benjamin would have probably had 25, 30 of them, and some of them undescribed, some described. And he was always working, when I was there, he was always working on labules. Always collecting. He always told me, you know, if I worked on 5 specimens a day or whatever for 12, you know, he could finish up so much stuff. But he was always collecting more, never satisfied. And he went to several places to get specimens. There was some Polhemus that I think he was in Denver, Colorado or something. He'd always stop there and get more specimens.
Mm-hmm. These are labules.
All labules, yeah. They were all in ethanol, I guess. And they were from all over the world. And he always published, when he published his papers, it was always based on an ontological study of each one. So it took him a long time to do each paper. And but occasionally, you know, he'd find things. People would send him stuff. He got this thing, Kazuha sent him that culture, and then there were some other things from Japan. But there have been things from all over now that have been, and other people have been isolating things that are really interesting. But yeah, I just worked there, and we have most of the people there were working with the plant anatomist. That was Sherwin Carquist, the wood guy, and so we'd go out and collect things, and he'd try to pan for gold, or he would be if in his office he'd have his stamps, or not so much his stamps, but he was editor of Mycology when I was there, and he had a collection of, you know, it was bigger than this, and he had all these different paper clips all around. It was over his desk. And he was always collecting things, stamps mainly. In that paper there, he collected perfins, especially from France.
Yeah, he told me that one time, and they were older French.
Yeah, they're really old things. Yeah. He bought a whole collection from a guy. I went down there, and the guy was in Tampa, I think. And But I've just kept up with this stuff. I keep publishing on Syncephalus because he had Syncephalus. Herbarium specimens. Didn't have many cultures, but during all that time, I was able to lyophilize most of the collection that he had from about 1984 to 89 of as many things that survived. So that would have been Semansia, Piptocephalus, and some Thamnidiaceae and some other things.
Mm-hmm. So are they here or?
Yes, they were the basis for that Zygolite.
Right.
That big grant.
Yep. Yeah, NSF, I guess it was Spatafora who was?
Spatafora, and there were four places. Yeah, the one, Jason Steich at Riverside and
was Reedus at Duke? Or?
Yeah, he was on it, but I don't know that. Yeah, I think there were people that were involved, but not, they didn't handle the 4 parts. We got some money for it, and Nicole Reynolds, she's done two phylogenetic studies based a lot on that material that we lyophilized. Yeah. The Piptocephalus, and there'll be a Semansia one coming up.
I was disappointed in that project because I was hoping, I don't know if you remember Echinosporangium, which is now called Lobosporangium, yeah. But I found it as a graduate student out right back of the biology building at Texas. Right. But that was a big disappointment when Benjamin was one of the reviewers of the manuscript that I'd sent in. Oh, yeah. And he wrote back and said, great paper, but the last paper I reviewed for Mycology was the same fungus. Yeah, it was Malik. Mm-hmm. And he had put off publishing it for several years, so he was lucky. He beat me to it. Yeah. But then I was lucky because you realized it was not a good name, and we used my name that I'd used as a beginning grad student, Lobosporangium, for it. But I thought sure it would turn up in that Zygolite project.
Well, there are so many. Jason Steich has gotten, and if you look up on that gene bank or whatever it is where the Zygolite, there must be, in addition to the Semansias and the other things, there must be at least 1,500 isolates that have been sequenced, including Echinosporangium.
But that's from Malik's collection. That was in ATCC.
I got some from NRL.
Yeah, but I think there are 2 collections, and I think one of them was his and one was mine. Yeah, I think. And they traded cultures, so. Yeah, NRL had it too. Yeah. Yeah, and so I don't think and the third person that had found it was Ranzoni, Francis Ranzoni. In Mexico he found it in Sonora. Right. But it's never been picked up again as far as I know. I got to go to MASMAC, which is a Mid-Atlantic States group. They have a foray every year. And so I went this year, and I actually have all of this material and all the letters I had sent around to Couch and all sorts of people, and they wrote back they'd never seen anything like it. Dr. Alex had actually solicited information about it. But so anyway, I talked about that, but the main thing was I wanted these students, who are mostly the MASMAC attendees, to go look for it. And so I offered a $500 prize, which was the most I felt I could part with, but might induce them to look. I should have maybe offered a little more.
Well, they need to use specific media like V8. Yeah. It's difficult to sporulate in culture.
Well, I used half-strength cornmeal on that one that I got behind the building, and because that's all I ever used for a long, long time. Okay. But I was lucky, probably. Right. But anyway.
It could have been, it might have sporulated because other organisms were there.
It was pretty clean. It was easy to purify when I got it, and it continued to fruit. One thing I saw, Ranzoni and also Malik mentioned that it probably needed high nitrogen.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I just can't imagine. It was found 3 times in about 2 years. Are there other zygomycetes like that?
Well, there are a lot of them that,
Just never been found again?
yeah, there are quite a few. This thing, Halteromyces, which is, that thing's never been found again.
I think on your website, which is really wonderful, I think that's the one with the drawing and not a photograph. Is that right?
Well, yeah, I may have a photograph. There was a drawing they had. Photographs weren't very good. I've got pretty good photographs. I need to update that.
That's a great website because it's hard to find anything useful to identify.
Right.
Because I remember there was a French and a German, the 2 keys that I had to use earlier. But Zik and Zika. Yep.
Yep.
And those were very hard for me to use. But without your website, and then to get them to species is really a difficult task.
Right. Mucor is probably one of the worst ones.
Yep.
Rhizopus they've done some work with, and of course now they've worked on the Mortuariales. That was published not too long ago, a couple of years.
Well, let me ask you something else. One day by accident, we discovered that Melcher's reagent on some zygomycetes, it turns the hyphae red.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, have you ever?
No, because I don't have any Melchers in my lab now. I don't know why. I think they use it over because Matt Smith and they use that probably with their truffles.
Yeah, and there's no reason you would think to use it, but
Right.
but sometimes in labs if you have trouble, some of these penicillia and some of these other things sometimes confuse me.
Right.
And I'm not sure they're not zygomycetes. And boy, a drop of this stuff really helps.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to try to do that with some of the Semansias.
Yeah, see if it works on them. It'd be interesting. Yeah. So no, I still think they're some of the most beautiful fungi that there are, and so you were lucky to work on those. And the drawings of them are just really beautiful.
Right, Benjamin. That was a requirement. He had me draw a bull Benny at first, and he said I couldn't draw for sour apples. But I refined my technique. But he did too much stippling, I think, because it indicated things were dark when they weren't. So other things I published have been not so much stippling.
You mentioned his gold mining, panning for gold, not mining, but the last time I saw him, I was at my daughter's in San Diego, and I had written him and said, I was going to be there, and could I visit? And he said, well, he'd come down and visit. And I think the reason he wanted to come there and visit was that he wanted to go pan for gold because he had all his equipment in the car. And so that was the first I knew of that. I'd heard of his stamp collecting earlier, but...
He had a dry sluice, and we were up in the Lucerne Valley. It was so dry. It was just dry as a tick. And he would put this stuff, and it was one of these electric blower, no, I guess it was a gas blower engine. And he had it hooked up to this thing with one of those hoses you use in your dryer, and that thing would shake. And I never saw any gold coming out of anything. He always had that little tiny thing of gold. So, but maybe he filled it up many times, I don't know.
So you mean he was looking at the dust?
Yeah, the actual, because
instead of water, he was running, you said dry sluice, so it's one for dirt.
Yeah, he said in the Civil War, there were big fights because the Confederates and the Union wanted to get money to support the war, and they scraped all that down to bedrock and got all the gold there. Apparently, I don't know whether that's true or not. I guess it is.
Did he grow up in California, or he just...
He's from Illinois.
Okay, well, that's where he went to school with.
Yeah, with Shaner, and he was a chemistry major at first, and then he did a master's on Myxomycetes of the brown-filled woods, and those are all those specimens at the Farlow. They're really nice specimens. And then he did a PhD, and I'm not sure what genus. It might have been just Labulbinia.
No, he did that really classic paper with Shaner on labules, where they found 7 species, I think, that could be on one beetle. They were partitioned on different parts of the beetle. But his thesis was on Gonopodia.
No, that was just a paper.
Oh, I thought that was his thesis, and that he and another person.
Yeah, that Johns, he was, but yeah, that was all done, I think, later on. He did his PhD on Labule.
Oh, he did do the labule. Okay, I have that completely wrong then, because I wondered, because that was so different, the Gonopodia thing, if that was the right genus, but they worked out the life cycle on 2 different species of that group, which is a really unusual fungus.
Yeah, I think he got all that stuff around Boston, in those ponds.
Thaxter's ponds?
Yeah, those ponds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he because he got a postdoc, which was rare in those days, in 51, 52, to work at the Farlow, and he took pictures of all of Thaxter's types, and he had the negatives. He always referred to the negatives when he was looking at things, and he did a lot of other things too. He made a lot of specimens or slides of the Semansias and various other things, including things like Arthroderma and stuff that Thaxter had made. So those all need to go back to the Farlow. I have them there in the lab.
Yeah, I know that all of the things in the Farlow, he had remounted, I think, some of them, and then Isabel Tavares also had come later, I think. Yeah, so they were in very good shape.
Yeah, well, I think all the Labule stuff now is with Alex Weir, and it'll eventually. He said he was going to retire, but he's got several students.
Alex.
I don't think he's going to retire.
Alex, I can't believe that he's retirement age. We were just talking about that. All the people that we know, they're retiring.
Yeah, he wants to move back to
England.
Ireland, but his wife doesn't want to. So, but yeah, he has all those slides. Benjamin had 100 boxes of these black wooden boxes of slides of Labules. He always kept them standing up, and there were 2 or 3 of them at the end. He must not have referred to them. They had termites in them and bored into them. So
into the boxes.
Yeah, into the boxes.
Amazing.
So he didn't refer to those very often, I guess.
But the slides were intact.
Oh yeah, everything was intact. Yeah, probably. I didn't look at them because Alex. Excuse me, Alex has them.
Mm-hmm. So has he been working much? I know that they figured out he and some of his students have looked at the ones that had all of the different species of Labules on the single beetle, and those were very interesting studies. Yeah.
But he never did Benjamin, it was all morphological stuff.
Yeah.
He used the old techniques that Thaxter did. And I know he would buy or find out different kinds of shellac to make the rings.
Something called flake shellac.
Yeah, it had to be the right thing. And there was also asphalt cement, but I could never find out what that was.
Well, I had trouble finding the flake shellac. I looked, well, there was no internet at that time, but I was looking for flake shellac, and I just couldn't find anybody who knew what it was. I eventually found some, I think, in Europe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so you had to take it and put in a solvent.
Yeah, and it was for days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it had to be the right stuff.
Well, he also was able to do the pictures the way Thaxter had done them, right?
Yeah, he figured all that out.
Yeah.
Well, I think there was a talk, were you there, when it must have been in '89, because it was when his wife was sick, and he had me say how Thaxter had used the old, what do they call that? It was the old artist technique or something. He would draw his laboules, and then I guess he would outline them in real soft pencil, and then outline them, put them up on those plates the way he wanted them, and then he'd rub the backs of those things that he had up there, how he arranged them, and then he transfer
So it was like making carbon paper with just the single lines, the outlines of.
And then because that just arranged what he had.
Yeah, because they fitted a lot of stuff on those pages. Yeah. Well, I know he was one of the most generous people I know, because I don't know if you told him I was interested in laboules or who would have told him, but he sent me the reprint, which was that thick. It was 5 volumes.
Oh, he sent you the whole thing?
He sent me the reprint of it, which was the 5 volumes in a stack about that high. Okay. And it had his introduction, which is so helpful. Right. He wrote an introduction to Thaxter's 5 volumes when Kramer reissued it or reprinted it. Yeah, that was a real undertaking, but that just is full of all sorts of information, that introduction he did. Mm-hmm. But he sent that, and he was always very generous all along. He was a very nice person. Mm-hmm. Helped students, and it's amazing he had so few.
You're right. There's just he's isolated. Yeah. And he only had the 4, and I'm the only one that really continued on working. Don Ford, I think, got a degree in plant path, and Cliff was out at University of British Columbia in science teaching. But
Cliff, what was his name?
Anastasio. Yeah. And then Bruce Tucker, I think he did a postdoc in somewhere in Arizona, looking for things that of medical importance, but he never continued on, didn't get a job. So.
Well, you did him proud.
Okay. Yeah.
You did, and your webpage, even without any of the newer names and things, and I guess we should point out for people who might be looking at this that what have been called zygomycetes have been divided up too, but the things that you looked at were all in the regular group with mucors and rhizopus. They're in that part of the group. Right. Yeah. So anyway, anything else to add?
I don't know. I'm just continuing working. I don't think it's like you never finish up what you start, completely.
I've still got unpublished stuff. I've been retired 9 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're lucky you're here in the place where you've worked much of your academic life. Yeah. I should never have moved.
Yeah. Well, but Matt is a good person, and he was really backing the zygomycetes.
Yeah, he's got a good, smart head. Yeah. So, thank you very much.
Okay, that's about it. I think you'd have to ask Jason Steitch and some of the other people that were on the grant that were really involved in the sequencing and all that to figure out all the things that were sequenced. And
yeah, I think most of that's published.
No, there's there's the little bit on the let's see, a little bit on Rhizopus.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the one on Mortreales, And then there are a lot of other things that need to be worked up, because the Mucormycota that was a huge group.
So did they sequence all of the ones that were available? All of the...
Everything I think they could get their hands on.
See, I didn't realize that, because I thought they were doing enough to get an overall tree.
Yeah, well, they did a lot of that, but after a while, they had so many things. So I think it's, what is it, 1900 or 1700? It's a huge number of genomes. Wow. And some of them are, repeats of one thing, but others are, I think a lot of the stuff came from NRL because we could get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's harder to get things from them now, so it's
Right.
lucky you did it at the right time.
Yeah, you've got to have people employed, and they can't get hired now.
And for a while, NRL was having technicians do the cultures.
Right.
And how would you know if you didn't know the group when you got a contaminant in there and lost the original culture?
Yep. I found some of that myself.
Yeah.
Because the only professional person there now is Kerry O'Donnell.
He retired a month ago.
Oh, did he?
He retired, yes. Yep. So that's out of there. And Cleet died. Cleet Kurtzman died 2 years ago, 3 years. Yeah.
Peterson retired.
Yeah, before any of the others.
Right.
So it's a shame.
Yep.
And there are people who could fill those jobs.
I know they could.
Yeah. We've been talking about this. Several places have not hired. LSU did not hire another mycologist in the biology department when I left. At the current time, there's nobody at the Farlow Herbarium. Don's retired, but he's still very active. So there are a number of other places too. John Taylor and Tom Bruns are both retired at Berkeley, and although there are other mycologists there, they're not quite, they haven't quite filled those positions. They're a little different. So anyway, there is a young woman here from Chile, and she has been pushing for the fungi to be better recognized, and so she wants to talk about funga, flora, and fauna, flora, and funga. So those three groups, the three Fs. And just to point out that the fungi are on their own. They're a group on their own. So I think that might help to do that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very, very much for getting over here like this.